If you're currently injured or you ever get injured in the future, you're likely going to try this technique called RICE, which is the acronym for Rest, Ice, Compression, Elevation. But is this an outdated theory that can actually prolong the healing process compared to expediting the healing process? Let's talk about it. The first thing we need to understand is, what is the body actually doing when we get injured? What is that natural, innate response within the body when there's an injury? Well, it's sending inflammation. Inflammation is the blood, the oxygen, the healing proteins, the nutrients, everything to go and rebuild that injured site to go back to its original state. So let's talk about a sprained ankle, for example. And maybe you sprained this doing your sport, training, going up and down the stairs too quickly and you slipped. Whatever the case is, you sprained your ankle and you want to get back healing as fast as you possibly can. So we have this injury, your body's going, whoa, something just happened. We're going to send all of this inflammation, which again is all the healing nutrients, to rebuild this area. But now we're wanting to apply ice. Now, what is ice doing? Applying ice slows down that healing process. So you want to remove the ice and allow the body to do what it's actually designed to do. And this is what I find extremely interesting. So the whole theory of RICE, which again is rest, ice, compression, elevation, was coined by Dr. Gabe Merkin. But then in 2013, he came back and said, hey, do you know what? This might not actually be the most effective way to actually heal an injury. It could actually prolong the healing process, which is pretty crazy because he's the one who coined it. But also a massive kudos to him, because he went through all this data, started getting all this feedback from doctors, physios, etc., saying this actually isn't effective. Resting and icing isn't that effective. It's actually prolonging it. But first thing you want to do is start creating movement. We want to start moving it while following the breath as your guide. If it's way too painful, of course, then ease off. But just start creating small movements around that area, and we want to help assist the blood and oxygen flow to that injured site and just get it not used to being stagnant. We want to pump out the old inflammation and then bring in the new blood and oxygen flow. Pump out the old, bring in the new. Next thing you want to do is start adding pressure to that area. Pressure is actually very healing. So maybe you want to sit exactly how I am right now and just slowly start bringing some weight onto that sprained ankle. And again, make sure you're following your breath as your guide. Breathe diaphragmatically. Breathing diaphragmatically can feed the body up to 6 times the oxygen absorption, and oxygen is what? The #1 essential nutrient our body requires to survive, thrive, and to recover. The third thing we want to do is a fascia decompression technique. Now, why do we want to do this? So first of all, our connective tissue holds our entire body together. But if we are very compressed in our feet or in our legs, and you're not doing much stretching, or if you're not doing any massage or deep tissue work, which fascia decompression in my eyes is the ultimate form of decompressing your connective tissue and for recovery, this is something you want to start applying right away. Because think about the gates of flow. We have our femoral triangle coming right at the top of our leg here. We want to start opening up the gates of flow so that we can assist the body with its healing process. So now it's going to get to that ankle, and now it's going to start pumping that flow back up to the heart. And that's what the movement's going to do, the compression is going to do. So what I would do is do fascia decompressions both above and below the injured site to assist it. Story time. This was pretty crazy. So I was around 14, 15 years old. I shattered my ankle. I shattered my fibula in 7 places, my tibia in like 4 places, and it was an absolute disaster. Obviously tore tendons and ligaments in that process, and I got surgery. So I got 3 big pins put in, and then the day after surgery, when I came home, guess what? My aunt came over, Deanna Hansen, who's now my business partner, and she's the founder of block therapy, which is the fascia decompression technique that I teach. She started working both above the cast and below the cast the day I got out of surgery, which is brilliant. So it's starting to pump that inflammation out, but also pumping in the new inflammation, the new blood and oxygen flow to feed it. Because you don't want just the inflammation to stay stagnant there, you gotta pump it out. Then guess what she made me do? This is what I found crazy back in the day, and I'm not saying do this by any means. She actually made me stand up in my cast and apply pressure onto my shattered ankle. And you know what? It worked. Why did it work? Because I was told I needed to be in a cast for 3 months. I was in a walking boot within 4 weeks. And sure, I was young, my body can heal very quickly, but that's what the doctor said. And they couldn't believe how fast I recovered from this. They ended up taking the pins out, and hey, things are good. There's scar tissue there, but I'm still melting through the scar tissue, and my mobility in it is absolutely incredible. Another story time. This guy right here. These two metacarpals were dislocated and broken. So what did I do? I was walking home, put my hand onto my thigh, popped it back into place, and then immediately I started creating movement, just like I mentioned, started creating movement. And then I got home and I started doing block therapy, the fascia decompression technique, all throughout my forearm. It was very difficult to do it on the hand, so I really just opened up the gates of flow. So I worked in the pec, opened all this area up, and worked in the forearms. That's where it comes down to just knowing and understanding what is the body doing when it's healing, understanding what pain is, breathing through it, not in a forceful, aggressive way, but of course, like respecting your own limits and what your body's telling you. And I never got this checked out, and it feels absolutely amazing. And if there's scar tissue in there, I can keep blocking it and start reintegrating that tissue into my body. So from my personal experience of going through many injuries and recovering from them by not applying ice has been the best decision I made for my injuries. Now, tons of people in our community that are injured, they're following this protocol and it's healing them significantly quicker. So if you ever get injured, this is something that I would recommend is don't necessarily follow that RICE technique. And again, I'm not a doctor. So if you want to get another expert opinion when you're injured, of course do that. Listen to your body, what feels right to you, and this will help you significantly quicker. And remember, if there's always scar tissue that's developed there, you can always melt through that and get your injury back or wherever that injured site is back to functioning properly. That will take longer though than if you just treat that injury properly right when it happens. So if you got anything out of this video, try not to ice an injury. That's just literally a beaver dam to flow. It's just gonna slow down the whole process. Let's take that beaver dam out of the way, start assisting the body with this natural healing process, and I hope this made sense to you. So let me know in the comments below your thoughts on this. Again, hearing it straight from the doctor that coined this theory, Rice, now saying don't necessarily use that, is very interesting. Try this out. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have any recommendations for videos in the future, please let me know. These are extremely fun to do, and I'll see you in the next video.